Hello, hello. How's it going, everybody? Happy Tuesday. Gonna kind of do a little low key today. Meetings and such got moved around, so I got a bit of a hard stop, and also we've got some things that we eventually want to get into, but I kind of want to like make a list. So there's a bunch of Tauri topics, and I think there's a bunch of local first topics that we want to get into. But I think we lay them out and we kind of poke around at them a little bit and see if they're at a place where it makes sense to dive into them. So some of this is it's hard to dig into that kind of stuff on a short stream, but also there wasn't anything that immediately jumped out at me as like, I want to do this today, that I would like try to force it into, like an hour long stream or so. So I think what we do today is that we go through a few of the like potential topics, and there's within that, I've been seeing a bunch of libs pop up recently that GitHub or whatever has shown it in the feed, and it's using Tauri, but not necessarily using the like direct at Tauri /API type packages, and instead doing for whatever reason, and not to invalidate their reasons, but for whatever reason they have, making this library so as to give alternatives to communicating from the web view to the Rust side of things. That and like working with Windows and sort of like passing information between windows. That's come up as a topic a few times on our stream, but it's been a while since we looked at some of them. Like eGUI was a popular topic. Was that a year ago now? Year and a half ago? And there was a Tauri plugin that got spun up, and I don't know that it stayed well supported. But I think there's some interesting use cases there where we're not avoiding using Tauri, but we're like sprinkling some additional sugar on top of the pieces that exist. Is probably the best way to frame it in my mind. So I'd like to look at some of that, and then we might jot down some notes as far as like what are the next local first libraries that we want to look at, or next topics within that within the ecosystem there. So it'll be a little bit like kicking around ideas and looking at some of the like alternative pathways to make a Tauri app work effectively. So yeah, I think it'll be kind of fun. Feel free to, if you have any questions or whatever, leave them in the chat. Chat, I guess, shows up here on the screen. Leave them in the chat or in the comments or whatever, and we can touch on them. Because we'll kind of like be all over the place anyways. So what's the big deal? So we'll pop on over here. We do have the whoop. Did it? Oh. Wait. No, we're good. I forgot to switch it into Windows mode. There we go. Okay. I thought this took over my hotkey for this, but I still had it in Mac keyboard mode. So as those keys were flip-flopped on my on the keyboard. Not like physically, but like I pressed the key that I was supposed to press, but it was a different key because it was in Mac mode. So the computer got a different key than I thought I was pressing. Anyways, so start the day off with crossing the thing off. I guess this is the thing that I want to take care of. I need to fix the timestamp. I'm okay with it like only updating some of the time. Like it doesn't need to constantly update. What would be a good streaming to do? I thought I had a to do. Okay. Planning, sure. This should be fine. We can pull this over. I don't, why are you not moving? Whoa, weird. Okay. Obsidian freaked out for a second there. I wasn't dragging. Because we crossed a lot of them off. Also, I changed the way I was crossing stuff off about halfway through, but you know, it is what it is. And some of these things we've since decided to not do, or they should be crossed off, and I haven't yet. But we'll get to that. What was it? Future topics, previous topics, and to-dos. Let's just do a general to-dos section. It says this is sort of like a notepad-y type situation, which I am perfectly comfortable with. Stream to-do should update the timestamp more often. Okay. And that's eating my... Oh, no, I guess it wasn't. I was pressing the wrong one. Okay, so what we're going to do, I mean, I guess in theory we could go through this list real quick, but I might just save that towards the end and we can pop back into it. But what we're going to start with is basically do a search on GitHub for Tauri. And then like as part of that, we're gonna like go over the options for communication from front end to Rust. Actually, I'm gonna search as a web view. I think in some ways it's handy to otherwise structure. Whoop! I was apparently typing in the other screen. In some ways it's handy to structure the or like structure things around the idea of a front end and a back end, but in reality it's not cool. Whoa, where did that come from? In reality, it's not a perfect representation, which is fine. Like it doesn't need to be perfect, but also it's imperfect enough to as potentially communicate the wrong thing. So when you say back end and front end, that lends itself a certain expectation as far as like if you develop something for a browser versus, browser plus a server versus a Tauri app, which is, there's enough of a difference between those that we don't want to lean on that too heavily. Okay, so I just realized why you no update. Oh, streamer.bot lied to me. I don't think this will be a problem, but we're gonna go back here and we'll click the sign in button. Yes.
You might know me as the small computer guy or the ubiquity fairy or whatever you want to know me as, but what you probably don't know me as is a dude that likes 3D printing.
What is that? Gosh, it opened up a different browser. Give me a second. What is playing? There we go. All right. It's a thing. Sure, why not? Did that come through? I have a feeling that probably came through. Oh well. Not much we can do about it. Yes, please. Yep, sure. Okay, fine. Do the thing. Sign in. All right. Now turn it off and on again. Maybe we will need to do. Okay. They didn't show up there because it said it was connected, but it was not actually connected. You know how that computers, gotta love them. All right, there we go. Okay. Coming back. Darth Buddha, good to see you. Juan, will you touch on topics related to biometric authentication? It's definitely not going to be a thing that we necessarily go through today, but that's actually, it's an interesting question because I guess in part biometric communication has some expectation of like on a phone because they all have fingerprint readers at this point effectively. But you can have something like just because it's on the phone doesn't mean it can't be on a computer too. There's going to be use cases for it. And I think we're not going to, where's my to-do list? What's with computer stuff not working today? It's not dragging. Let's do less in the future topics, and I'm just gonna make a new one. Whatever. We'll clean it up later. That's a problem for future us. Speaking of which, let's add it to the list. It's definitely not gonna be something that we go through today, just because of time constraints, and that's gonna be an involved process, you know. But what were we? Biometric auth. We'll put it on the list, and I think there's going to be a couple like bits on how like when we were first like giving context to the things we're going to talk about today, we were looking at what is like alternative communication paths or like the multiple window. Like somebody was asking in a comment on one of the videos. I don't remember which one. The eGUI example doesn't seem to work for them anymore, and it seems like it's a reasonable use case to use eGUI as a way to do very like small windows. So like small widget type windows rather than like the overall thing, which would be like that feels like it makes a lot of sense for auth type situations. It would be nice to add the fingerprint reader for CPU. Well, I guess this isn't. Whoa. Okay. No. Sorry. My daughter put a bunch of stuff on my desk, and I just knocked it all over. Little Valentine's Day stuff, I guess. Okay. Good. Yeah. A YubiKey. Those are like a thing. It's not really biometric, but also it's in some ways like bio-auth, if that makes sense, because it requires some sort of capacitive touch. Like it does. I don't think technically it has to be touch, but there's some expectation of capacitance so as to have a physical step so as to provide the auth as a I mean, I guess it's basically two-factor auth at that point. I'm not sure what you mean by fingerprint reader for CPU, Darth Buddha. You'll have to let me know. They make USB size fingerprint readers. Been meaning to get one for logging into your computer. Yeah. Okay. Like laptops do. The MacBook that I have has a fingerprint reader on the like top right key. Um, so yeah, I guess the more I think about it, the more that's not way out there. Um, I'm not sure how to say your name. Yaxo? Let me know. Let me know how to pronounce that. You'd love to hear more about local first apps sync data. Where to store the CRDT docs, DB or S3. Oh, I would have not have gotten that. Jijo? Jijo. Jijo or Jijo? Dasha? Is that oh crap, now I, now I don't remember. Jijo, Jijo, Jijo. Okay. Great. Jijo. So there's use your own based on Elixir or use a third party service like Ably. Okay, there's a lot in this question, and I think that's part of like what I want to get to, and as far as like the CRDT stuff goes. Well, excuse me, as far as the local first ecosystem stuff goes, because like that's one of the places where, in theory, it is like you can use these libraries and it is the same as if it was in the browser, but it's not really, because with Rust you have more direct access to the operating system. So like this to do app, and actually here let's do a little chat. Local first and where to store data. And actually, I guess just to keep myself organized, boop, and let's go over this. So when you're thinking about local first, part of local first is that writes are done local first, and there's a bunch of like writing out there. The thing that really gave terminology, I think, to the ecosystem was a article, paper, whatever you want to call it, from a consulting company called Ink and Switch, or research. I'm not sure how they qualify themselves. But they laid out, I think it was 7 tenets, and one of those was, basically actions happen in your local, and then they're synced up to wherever you want to store them. In a browser, it is very much like cache-ish, and when you have a Tauri app, you could actually do more with it because you have access to Rust, which has access to the local file system. So like this to-do list right here, when I add items or check things off, that actually writes out to the file system in a place where, I mean, right now it's hard coded because I'm using it and I wanted to ship it. Oh, nice. Welcome from Ukraine. So like doing it in an app sort of is like more fundamentally unique than what I think a lot of the local first ecosystem is designing for. And obviously you have to pick some scope. So not saying that everybody's intentionally avoiding working with a Tauri app or whatnot, but setting your scope to it works in the browser is a good place to start for that. So this comes back around to where do you store the data? And I think the things that the libraries that like really speak to me as far as integrations with Tauri are the ones where there's some expectation of like peer-to-peer syncing, so as to like you could potentially sync over the network WebRTC or whatever protocol, and have that process happen locally between two peers. There might need to be some sort of like system to ensure that connection happens, but like effectively the communication is direct. And I think what's interesting about that to me is that you could then throw a server into the mix, and that effectively just becomes another peer. So when you start talking, where do you want to store the docs, DB or S3 or whatever, like fundamentally it doesn't matter, and you can do none of them or all of them in a setup where there's some expectation of peer-to-peer, because adding a DB or adding an S3 bucket or whatever, it's just another peer. So as long as you have the code written to make that connection between these peers, or use, some signaling server or whatever, fundamentally it doesn't actually matter, which is kind of neat. So I think what it really comes back to is the type of data and what you're syncing, and like the level of privacy and how much of that matters relative to how important is like a central sync authority. There are some systems like the folks at Rossi Corp are working on zero.dev, I believe. That fundamentally, and I guess this is actually one we could put on our list. Zero dev? No. Here, this one. I can drop a drop of that in the chat. But the things that they've done, they built Replicache, but they built Replicache prior to this, and they tend to work more around a central sync authority. So while some of that stuff can happen locally, it is eventually synced up to, and all of the like diffing happens at a server. So depending on how you want to control that sync and the concerns around the data, you're going to likely end up steering more towards a model where you have a central sync authority, or you have more of a very clearly peer-to-peer, and central authority is just another peer. So like how much data, the type of data, the type of users, like all of that kind of comes into play and dictates which path you sort of want to go down. How do you get the initial data for a new peer without the DB or other storage? So and that's part of it, and I think that's part of what makes Tauri interesting for working with this, because when you are doing, if your system is purely peer-to-peer, you need to have each peer care about and store their own data. When you're working in a browser, the only option you really have is, there's a couple options, but effectively all of them are limited by the fact that the browser can just decide to, for whatever reason, delete it, which is not good. And that's kind of where having a central sync server is helpful, because then you can have folks work in a browser, and if for whatever reason their browser decides to delete everything, they at least have ideally most of their history still there. But if they're offline for 2-3 days, in theory, that storage could hit the cache limit or whatever, and it could just be cleared out, and that could actually not be synced. So what's interesting with a Tauri app is, since you have more direct control or access to the operating system, you can actually save that file outside of the actual web view. So you could put your data storage in Rust within a Tauri app and have that be the thing that's doing the syncing to other peers or central authority, and that could then be persisted to the file system. So that kind of circumvents some of the issues that are inherent to just using a browser directly. And in some ways, now your file system that is, running the Tauri, the file system that's attached to the system running your Tauri app is kind of like a sync server, in which, presuming it's on, it has some like more strongly persisted way to keep the data, or more strong. Persist and keep are the same thing, right? It has more direct control over the ability to persist the data than relative to a browser. So it's this all comes back to the what is the kind of data, and how do you, like, what's the level of privacy, and how, like, what do you care about? Like, what's the thing that's, what are the priorities of the data, basically? Like, essential sync authority would be helpful if you have a lot of data that is shared between a lot of users, because then you could potentially do like a partial sync, because I might only care about a subset of the data. But if like I've been for some time now actually working on this library, and it is a finance, not that one, this one. This is a personal finance app. Cash flows is the buzzword if you're familiar with that term. But it's not like hard budgeting like some of the other apps. It's more of it's more future looking, where you lay out all of your expected transactions, and it's sort of we figure out what the future can look like. Having the historical data and all your past transactions can be nice and can potentially get you information. But this is the kind of stuff that actually helps you make the decisions, in my opinion. Anyways, that being said, one person might share this with a couple people. The amount of data that you have is like negligible. It's a couple records. I mean, I imagine that my integration with it, or like my finances it in, are probably rather involved. But still, we're talking like 30 records. Like, that's nothing as far as storage size. So the thing that we care about in this case more is being able to store it in a safe way, but also be very very concerned about like the privacy of it. So like encryption can be important, and being able to save it out to the file system so it doesn't go away is important. I don't really need to be, well, having the sync is nice, and being able to like have it sync between devices is nice. I could functionally work without that as a requirement. So like for a while I was only using it on, my computer, only using it on my phone, and I didn't have any sync at all. It was all just local. It was persisted to local storage at the time. So I don't think there's a right answer, which makes the local first conversation a little bit more complex. And also, not everything needs to be a local first app. Like, there's certain use cases that very much fit the model, and I like the things that come out of it, as far such as like data ownership and privacy. But fundamentally, not every app needs to fit into this little box. And then there's enough like different paths that it makes the topic more complex, and it's not a. I think as this stuff develops, it's going to take a stronger hold in the ecosystem, but I don't think it's going to become an all-encompassing thing like microservices, or like GraphQL really like jumped on the market and took over like all the conversations for a while there. I don't think it's going to do that, but I think there's going to be apps that use this that are done really well and everybody talks about. And there's already a few of them, like I think like Figma uses a lot of these ideas, like Excalidraw, linear. I hear lots of good things about those apps. I suspect that that's mostly how you're going to end up seeing this. And it matters less about how you store the data or do the syncing, and it matters more around what the end experience ends up being for the user and how their data is, and like exposed in the end to them. So does that help? That was a lot. Gigio, did that, I hope, answer your question? I answered it in the longest non-answer way possible, but I don't know that there is a right answer here. It's which path is going to be the right path for your situation. Darth, you've been getting OCD over your app structure as of late. Really thinking more about where you're going to put things. Yeah, the and Stronghold plugin. In theory, I think that could be nice for this, but also I don't think Stronghold works on all these systems. And like I've got you can visit the website, so it's then expected to run into the browser too. So the intent of a Tauri app is like Tauri app or finance app plus UX plus kind of thing. Thanks, Gigio. I appreciate it. You might be the first super sticker that I got. I have we got some other, I don't remember what they're called, but I haven't seen those stickers yet. Appreciate you. Thank you. Yeah, there's in some ways, like I've been in a lot of meetings planning architectures, and I've spent a lot of time talking about architecture with folks, and in a lot of cases too, like with where some of these apps are at, it doesn't actually matter as long as you have an idea of like, we were talking about the paths. As long as you have an idea of which path you kind of want to go down eventually, or a high level direction, just start walking down that path. And like in some ways, the organic development is going to lead you in a way that's going to give the best experience. So like care about the decisions of I'm building with Tauri versus Electron versus whatever. And like once you kind of make some of those decisions, or like I want more front end, less back end, or I want to do local first. Like once you have some of those high level like decisions out of the way, or at least some sort of pros and cons list so as to whittle that down, you can kind of just start going. So like in here, I ended up throwing in Supabase, if only just for myself, so I could get a sync. And this comes back to Gigio, you mentioned WebSockets and PubSub. They're just all different communication mechanisms. So whatever's going to provide the best experience for the user is obviously going to be maybe not obvious, but it's the right answer feels like should be what's going to be the best experience for the user. And if the responsiveness in data ownership is important, heading down the path of local first starts to make more sense. In this case, the thing that I think is important is that I'm like this isn't the type of app that there's been a whole bunch of them. Lots of them have VC money. But the problem is, as soon as you inject those type of requirements in there, the cost that you would ask people to pay relative to the cost to run it, the margins get incredibly slim, and it gets very difficult to actually run it to where, like if you've heard of Mint, you didn't own your data if you're using that. They were doing stuff with your data. So you were the product. You weren't paying for it because you were giving them your data, and that was your payment. So doing this in a way where we can be very infrastructure light and potentially have folks self-host if they're interested in that, I think is something that's important for this, which is part of what led me down this trip of, more and more getting into local first and exploring options. And I started this back in 2012. The ecosystem has evolved a lot, as has my ability to write the code to actually do the things. And this has kind of evolved along the way. I feel like it's finally getting to a point where I can evolve it quickly and it's stable. There's still a lot of I used CSS and JS for a while. It didn't work out great. I need to update that at README. Actually, it's I ended up ripping all of that out. So you're going to make bad decisions, and you're going to make decisions that don't work out, but seemed good at the time. And that's kind of just how it is. But as long as you continue heading in the direction that you originally laid out, like Gabriel, the decisions are best focused around making sure it can evolve gracefully. I think that's where it's worth putting in the time. But that's very amorphous. So, so you're saying programming is in dating in high school. I feel like that could be really loaded, depending on how that experience went for you. So I think long story short, there's no right answer. Get an idea of where you want to go. WebSockets versus HTTP, like Electric SQL, which is a local first thing, does not use WebSockets. I've got Supabase wired up into this, and it's, I guess I would qualify it as local first, but I don't have a sync engine. I am using the WebSockets to sync updates from Supabase, but also I don't expect Supabase to stick around forever, or at least not in a way where it's directly presented to the user, I guess, because right now I basically just have a Supabase sign-in form. But I don't want it to be it's not going to be something that is a requirement. Somebody would be able to use this app and have it all operate locally. They could run a Tauri app on one computer and have everything sync locally. That would be my ideal. And in some ways, the only reason I would keep Supabase around would be if somebody wants a central sync mechanism, or maybe we keep it for auth or something. But it was a quick thing to chuck in there and roll with it, just so I would be able to iterate quicker for my own specific use case. Supabase sucks. I'm not keen on those negativity. We don't really need the negativity, but also what is it, the Star Wars thing? Only Siths deal in absolutes. I think Supabase is definitely good for some use cases. It's like everything else, there's going to be pros and cons. I think they've got an interesting offering for a specific subset of folks. That would definitely be how I would qualify it. For me, it was easy to chuck in here because all I really needed was a way to store some data for at least the time being. And I don't even actually have the route exposed to you can't actually find it anywhere. It's just If you look in the code, you'd be able to find it. But also, I can steal the database records. So if you use this and you want that, maybe talk to me first. But eventually, like, I do want some sort of like way to store this data, but I also don't want to have access to it, or potentially want to, so Supabase for enterprise level apps, I can see that. And so this is the clarification I think that is worthwhile saying, is that Supabase is useful. It is around for a reason, and they have some offerings that are going to ring true for people. That doesn't mean that it needs to work for everybody. If you're running an enterprise level app, it likely means that you can pay folks to do DevOps. So the question is, do you want to pay Supabase to do your DevOps, or do you want to pay somebody a salary to do DevOps? That's effectively what the conversation is. So if you're a small startup or something, having somebody full-time to do all the DevOps stuff, that's where something like Supabase might make more sense. And I think especially what's interesting over the past few years is a lot of these have evolved in a way where, in theory, you'd be able to swap between them, to where like you can run everything in Supabase up to a certain point, and then maybe you can hire a DevOps person to start doing more stuff, and then it could shift off of it. Scaling stuff is hard. So, what trade-offs are you willing to make? Shipping code is, and what the user sees is an important piece at the end of the day. So, yes, the clients that I work with are big for the day job, are big enterprise type stuff. GCP, Amazon. I guess I've used some Azure too. It makes sense for them, like the full Kubernetes treatment. I mean, maybe they don't need Kubernetes, but like, it definitely makes a way more sense than me working on this with a few folks here and there, all in our free time. It doesn't make sense for me to run a Kubernetes cluster for this. So, now with OS services like Coolify, DevOps can be a lot easier. Yeah, I mean that has definitely helped a lot too. So, like, scaling prior to Kubernetes even, woof. So like, people say Kubernetes is complex and you don't need it for many cases. And I don't think that's necessarily wrong. But like, before it existed, you had to be a big app or like a big company to be able to scale to those levels. So like, this scaling was a huge deal. And having these tools around is much less of a deal. So like, somebody can do, once like AWS Lambdas came around, it in some ways enabled folks to, like, the amount of folks that are like, yeah, I hit Hacker News and crashed my server for 2 days. With AWS Lambdas, like, once those started coming out of the scene, I saw a lot less of those kind of articles and more of the, I woke up and had a message that I had lots of visitors and like everything was still running. So that you get the articles of, I hit Hacker News and everything worked fine. But that doesn't mean that having a server now is bad. It's, if you're paying somebody to handle that server, it can be cheaper and it can potentially make sense. So, it's all trade-offs, and it's all like, what scale are you at, and how are you trying to deliver the best experience for the users. So just wanted to make sure that we went over that clarification, because I'm very much like, maybe this is the years of consulting, but like, literally everything depends. So Absolute's don't, while they make good discussion points, I don't think they really hold water. Okay, so we digressed a little bit, but we're already 45 minutes in. So I think I want to do just a little bit of searching here, and maybe I can go a little bit longer. I was shooting for an hour, but clearly we're coming up to it. I don't know if I can search without signing in. I haven't bothered signing into this one, partly because it's easier to not worry about hiding stuff. Because there's potentially some repositories that I might not want to leak. Anyways, so what if we just like search for Tauri? What comes up? Like we won't be able to do the code search. I know that is gated behind auth, but we're probably going to get a bunch of these kind of things. And like this is more of a okay, wait, we need to close a few tabs here. Before I forget this though, I'm gonna write this one down because I do want to eventually go over 0. This one might require some more like these bits. So we might need to run like a Docker container or something like that. It might take a little bit more effort. And do I have? Oh, I suppose I can just close these. We didn't actually quite finish all the WebSocket stuff. We got some stuff working, and I actually don't know if I committed anything. I swear my computer decides to restart itself like hours after I finish streaming every time. It's like Tuesday's update day for Microsoft, and they just wait for me to finish the stream. So it forces my computer to update, and then I just, once it's not in front of me anymore, once I don't see the little the counter that says the number of files edited, I just completely forget about it. Okay. We will need to come back to some of that though, but in some ways I might want to actually work on some of it upstream, because this WebSocket resource that we were pulling in, I want to get that set up in a way where it easily integrates with the other setup that we have. So this embedded into a StarFX, which is what we were looking at here, but also Vite has some cache, and I was having trouble getting that cache to bust to where we could just work on everything locally. All right. Anyways, iOS 14 semi untethered jailbreak. Interesting. Oh, this hasn't been touched for a while. That could be completely unrelated. It might just be coincidence. This seems to be more like a update soon. I know how that goes. It seems like there's probably going to be a bunch of these where it's like helpers to basically, hey, that's clocks. Like templates basically. In some ways, like we made one as well. And we're probably going to get a bunch of these too, where it's a basically an app. Like an open source app, and they just happen to have Tauri in the name. But there was, I don't have a feed on this because I'm not signed in. What if we search for like, I feel like it's a bunch of like Tauri RPC or something like that. Yeah, I'm kind of curious what some of these look like. And that comes back to like additional communication options. Oh, that's kind of cool. I suppose plugin is another thing we can look at too. I have a feeling a lot of these though are going to be things that folks spiked out, but then didn't touch. This one seems like it's a little bit more active. And to be clear, I completely understand that. I literally have multiple playground repos for that exact purpose. We spike a thing out, we dump it there because I'm also expecting to not touch it again for a while. So this seems like it's building stuff on the fly, and it's basically giving you what I'm presuming are, you give it a bunch of like functions. So that this is probably very much like Saturday. No, not Saturday. I saw Saturday, so I read it instead of Specta, Tauri Specta. We did, if you're interested in Tauri commands specifically, I've got a video. Click the buttons and go over to it. I thought it had some solid content, and we did go through Tauri Specta within that video too. This is neat because the docs could use, or at least this page could use a little work. There is, I think, a better one in docs.rs wherever they've got the link here, maybe. Yeah, this looks better. So you give it interesting ts.export. But basically it ends up like generating bindings for you, which is really nice. I don't know that we'll end up going through that on stream anymore, but that might come later eventually. Gabriel, you came in a bit late into the stream and you're looking into zero, and it seems to be exactly the strategy you're going to implement on your own. Yeah, you're welcome. If you're curious, we've pulled this up on stream a few times before. Local first. This, they've got a bunch of links on here. There's a Discord, which I'm a part of, but I am in two main Discords at this point, so I don't participate very much at all. They also like stream at the exact same time that we do, so I haven't made it to any of these either. But they got a bunch of resources and links. We pulled it up on stream a bunch before, and if you're interested in general, we went through like what we're doing now, but just like purely local first, and that was end of last year, I think, so about a month or two ago. And we touched on a whole bunch of these topics, or a bunch of these libraries. I do eventually want to pull some more in and look into them, but I have I guess we can pull it up while we're talking about it. / local first. We got a couple in here. I also did TinyBase like a year ago, and that is in I think in a separate repo. I was going to pull it into this one, but I haven't yet. We have done all three of these on stream. So we went through, played around with it, added a little code in there, and we whatever. Like I said, oh, I didn't actually call this playground. Should I put playground in here? Maybe I should. All the open source stuff here. Where is, okay, I gotta go my repo list. We've got a bunch of playground repos here. Tauri playground, and then I've got another playground something or somewhere. Rust playground, actions playground. So anytime I've got like code I want to play around with and test out, I end up dumping it into one of those repos. This is kind of one of those, but also I didn't name it playground for some reason, so I don't know. Take with it what you will. Either way, yeah, if you're interested in check a few of these out. These are all more of the peer-to-peer type syncing, which again, I kind of mentioned that idea for the use cases that I'm specifically looking at right now speak to me a little bit more, which is partly why I played around with them first. And also Zero is newer. They like just released the beta, or I'm not quite sure how they're qualifying it offhand, but Zero's pretty new, and it's from Rossi Corp, which is working on it, built Replicache, and then a hosted version of that called Reflect. And those have been running for a couple years, I think, a few years, maybe more. Zero was sort of their like second phase. So they took all the things that they learned from, and in some ways it's a rewrite, I think, of what they had did previously. So I think they architecturally bumped up against some roadblocks that it made sense to like cut off a new thing. All the stuff they've been doing though, like in my mind, what they're doing with Rossi Corp, they are definitely like kind of at the head. They're steaming ahead in the ecosystem. So I'm interested in Zero. It's just it wasn't ready when we wanted to look at it, and it also involves little work setting up infrastructure stuff, which is a little bit harder to demo in a single stream. But eventually, either way, yeah, check those things out. Zero seems really cool. Depending on your expectation as far as stability goes, it's definitely worth looking at the very least. All right, so this seems very much in the same. Yeah, okay. Specta is used under the hood for type generation. Yeah, so it's using the other library that we just looked at. So it looks like it's potentially doing some work on top of it, which neat, but also I don't know that it would be worth going through specifically, as we've already kind of gone through Tauri Specta. So it looks like it's probably just doing a little bit more on top of it. Yeah. Let's see what else we got. The Tauri Awesome RPC. Jijo, you were mentioning WebSockets. So this is a custom invoke system for Tauri using a localhost JSON RPC WebSocket. So we actually last week were playing around with WebSockets from our Tauri app in the web view to connect to an OBS, which is the streaming software I use, instance using JSON over WebSockets. It was a JSON frame, or no, string frame is JSON. I don't remember the language they used, but that's probably the same as this. The RPC specifically, though, is a little bit. I think it has a little bit more as far as specifications go. I've got hiccups. Hopefully, they're not coming through. So it's basically doing an invoke. Oh, it is literally doing an invoke. Use your Tauri invoke method as usual. So Tauri command. So I'm assuming that it's running here's a allowed domain. I'm assuming it's running a localhost thing to do this. So I'm guessing some of that is just like hidden within. So allowed domain. I'm guessing some of it is just hidden within this. Because there's a net script and then a responder that feels like potentially like a localhost server. You know, it hasn't been, and some of this too, I think, is the oh, is this Victor? Different Victor, maybe. Oh yeah. Oh, sorry, didn't even realize Victor. Victor's in the working group. There was, especially from like V1 to V2, there was a bunch of work around the communication, because in Tauri, when you do an invoke, there's a serialization that happens. So going back and forth, you need to serialize into a string and out of a string, basically. But JSON was generally the building block you used. So there, especially if you're doing lots of smaller messages, or like folks trying to transfer binary data, that didn't serialize in a way that would feel performant. Because it was there was chunking, or the how often those messages were sent meant that the serialization of that data became an issue. So there were some changes in V2, which I think have helped most of the situations, but also it didn't completely remove the need or otherwise, like push people away from exploring other options, as far as like, what if you do that communication over WebSockets or something like that instead? I think like V3, V4, that kind of situation, I think some more of these things might evolve and potentially provide additional options. Because part of what commands in that communication layer in Tauri were like moving towards were in part to move away from like running an actual like server, a local host, like something that would, if I'm running the app, if you don't lock that local host down, other apps on that system, or potentially on the network, depending on how it's run, could connect to it. And you don't want to have an open API that's running locally on your system. So it's, I mean, granted, in some cases that might actually be, if you're anticipating that might be a feature. But I would say in most cases that's not what you want, and you don't. It would be nice not to have to lock that down. So the IPC layer feels like that, but it's not actually running a local host server. I think all of the WebSocket implementations, though, were. Yeah, so like this is doing events, but also there in V2 is events. It has been so long since I worked with V1. If I'm being honest, that I don't even remember if there's events in V1. There are advantages, and I don't think we should completely write off the like using WebSockets, though. I have a feeling though that like if you're using some of the Tauri plugins that are implementing like fetch, or the WebSockets plugin, where it's handling a bunch of that work in Rust, the part of the benefit of doing that is that there's some, when you get to the web view and you're using or invoking those pieces from the web view, like you don't need to worry about cores, because cores is not intended to protect those type of situations. So like that can basically just be avoided. So you can design the APIs to better fit within a Tauri app, but then also is less portable. So trade-offs. But I can see leaning on some of these protocols more to where we can potentially have options outside of just the invoke. Well, at least like the invoke as we think of it now. We'll put it that way. What else do we got? We might want to search for like, a lot of these are, hey, we did a thing and it's built with React and Tauri. What? This was Tauri. Yeah, so like this is, I mean, they're basically setting up an activity presence thing. And so it's using RPC and then some Tauri stuff. Set activity. What is this using? RPC Discord. Yeah. So like this kind of stuff makes sense where like if you want to have like you don't it's not necessary to do all of this work in the browser. If you only care about presence, that's something that you don't really necessarily need to display in the front end, or at least like the stuff you would display in the front end could be very minimal, in which case you could do a lot of work in Rust, which I haven't actually seen any benchmarks, but I suspect that having that type of model will tend to be more performant because you're not blocking necessarily that, like in Rust, you can do like like parallel work. Threading is a thing. You're more limited in JavaScript around like the single process type stuff, especially in the web view. So if you're doing some work often, it might make sense to push some of that up to the Rust side of things, like in this case. Obviously, the trade-off is that that's going to be less portable. It's only going to work in the Tauri app, but like depending on what kind of app you're making, that might not matter. Okay, let's do. I think the RPC thing was the one that the one that I was thinking about. I think was maybe the one that Victor had made. But I thought I'd remembered seeing another one. Let's search for a Tauri plugin though. I'm curious if there's any other folks working on like outside of what's on this list. And actually, we haven't looked at this list in a while either. But let's come back to that. Where are we with? Okay, so we're still kind of searching through stuff for Tauri. What? Okay, I've got about 10-ish minutes, so we'll probably get through looking at a few more of these. Ooh, Fabian is looking at some auth stuff. I know this has come up a bunch. Neat. And this kind of stuff too is neat, where so the deep link plugin would be registering a link within your operating system, so as when somebody clicks on a link, or like the user on the system clicks a link that matches that thing that you've registered at the operating system level, it'll open the app. And I think you can have it fall back to like opening up a browser page. But if somebody clicks on a link, if you're not signed in, it could open up the app, take you to the auth, go through the OAuth flow, and then you're signed in, landed on wherever that deep link was supposed to take you. Obviously, that's ideal. I've seen lots of folks asking about this because it is potentially involved. Yeah, so like this is going to be a thing that you potentially run into. Deep links as a redirect URL is potentially going to cause issues. Oh, this plugin provides a solution by spawning a temporary local server. That is kind of amazing. Auth, both authentication and authorization is definitely involved. This might be something that would be kind of fun to play around with. I've done a little bit of work in this space, especially around like testing and whatnot. It would be kind of neat to see if we could get like a testable version of this that you could run locally without like relying on Google or GitHub, their auth systems. I have no idea how far along. Holy! I didn't realize that Fabian started this that long ago. OAuth on the desktop app. I mean, you gotta, depending on what you're doing, you gotta have some way to sign in. OAuth is sort of the leading method at this point. For better or worse. Yeah, you've been working on a plugin like this, but for support for mobile. Yeah, it is. Especially with mobile because you don't have multiple windows. Yeah. I mean, even getting it working in a browser is a pain. Because just depending on how folks have like default browsers or whatever set up, like I had an app for one of our cars, one of our vehicles, and they updated something. It would not work. Whatever they did, I was unable to use their app for like 4 months, and it was because I didn't have Chrome set as my default browser on my phone. It is I think that's also part of why I like the idea of local first is like if we're so reliant on external systems and then the auth that comes from it, like part of the reason that I want to make an app is that I'm then less reliant on a server always existing. But if you still have to deal with auth, then I guess that comes back to another one that I want to take a peek at, jazz.tools. Where'd my thing go? Here. I'm gonna put that on the list. They're doing a bunch of work with local first, but end-to-end encryption and permissions, which is pretty neat. And also actually in that space, auto merge, Beehive, I think is what it's called. We'll drop this one in. I don't know that it's quite far, or at least not released in a place where we'd be able to pull it in and start using it right away. But they have some really neat ideas. And do they have links? Where here? Beehive Lab Notebook? Yeah, Brooklyn. I watched an episode of. Do you have it on? Yeah, they worked at Fission, which seems like a pretty neat. Oh, nice. They're using Obsidian. It's Obsidian Publish. I watched a YouTube video of them with Johannes. They do the Local First podcast, I think it's called, on YouTube. And yeah, Beehive Auth. It seems really neat. Like the idea of this is really neat, and it's something that they're going to start to bake into AutoMerge. I'm excited for it. Brooke seems very knowledgeable I'm excited for where they're going to take things. But anyways, OAuth. Let's put that on the list. I don't know that that will come up immediately, but I have that's at the cross section of a bunch of stuff that I care about right now. So we will put it on the list here. I guess, I really thought there was was there a printer plugin? This is like legit printer. I think this is for V1. I feel like I remember seeing this. Yeah, this is like actually a printer. Oh, PDF. Okay. I thought it was actually like doing printer communication, which is not something I'm terribly keen on. It is have you ever tried to fix a printer? Is that does that show my age a little bit? That I was one of the office printer fixers back in the day. So let's see. Plug in deep link. Yeah, so like this is one of the, I don't know that Jonas is working on it anymore. Yeah, it looks like he hasn't touched it in a while. But both like GraphQL and this more GraphQL from the only client-side adapter currently is this. Yeah, so like the default IPC was expecting so there's a few too many times. I've completely missed the reference now. You know how like something's on the tip of your tongue? The thing that you're referencing, Gabriel, is on like the tip of my brain. I'm like, yes, I agree. But also I completely forgot the context. It's only been not even an hour yet. We need to get finishing up here though. So the ways that we're going to be able to communicate within a Tauri app, fixing printers. Yeah, okay. Yes, exactly. I knew I was going to say yes, exactly. I agree. No, I mean, that isn't all you either, Gabriel. It's when I let my brain just go in whatever direction it wants to go. Sometimes it goes in all the directions. Speaking of all the directions, so multiple communications types or ways, we've got, HTTP 1, 2, 3 / quicker. Once you get past like 2, then we start getting to all these experimental protocols. Plus there's GraphQL and there's WebSockets and there's RPC. All of those are all still potentially options that you could use in a Tauri app, either directly communicating from the web view to said whatever infrastructure you want to communicate with. But also in theory, we could do those hitting a local host, like a local server, local host, run through the Rust side of things in a Tauri app. But also we have more direct control of that web view. And that's how the IPC layer that exists is basically saying, well, go ahead and communicate over this protocol, but we're just going to like grab it and it effectively becomes more of an event listener, to where we're making a call. The web view thinks it's making an actual like request, but really it's just firing off an event as far as like the Rust side of things is concerned. In theory, we could do that in any of the protocols, I think. I don't think there's anything specifically stopping us from doing that. Obviously, though, like the fetch API was the first thing that really made sense. And that's effectively what the invoke is doing. It's doing like a fetch, but then the Rust side of things is just grabbing that or capturing it as an event. So I think that's what Jonas was working on here, but also Jonas has gone off and started doing their own thing. They're big into WASM at this point, which is cool. Some neat stuff. But also now they're not experimenting with this kind of stuff either. So, I'm not going to fault anybody for doing the things that they're interested in, but yeah, there's plenty of things to do, I think, in this space. It seems though that like RPC and then maybe something like this GraphQL would be, maybe we just go through it on stream. At the very least, we might get some folks interested in exploring that space some more. All right. I think that's probably, I think we have a couple topics or ideas that we can go through. I'll end up probably breaking these down a little bit more. There is Tauri plugin for Aptabase. I think, there's 28 pages. In theory, there's a lot that we could go through, and we can come back around to this and look at this list. I think specifically, though, the things that would be fun or interesting to dig into are those deep integrations, like this auth stuff, opening up multiple windows potentially to do auth, like an eGUI password entering mechanism, or these more direct communication methods or alternative communication methods from the web view to the Rust side of things. I think those would be some interesting bits to explore, especially as far as like, if you go that route, you might end up basically removing the ability to push your app out to the web browser. So we're starting to get some more in here though. Yeah, we just saw the Aptabase one. Here's that IPC wrapper for Tauri commands and events. That's the one that was built on top of Specta. Pinia stores, Svelte stuff. Yeah, I think maybe we here. Okay, yes, UDB sockets. I think digging through some of these a little bit more and oh, neat. I think digging through some of those more and maybe exploring that space a little bit more would be rather interesting, because that's where the integrations get involved, and I think that's where we're potentially going to see more advancements come V3, V4. So if it's something that we can explore on stream and get folks interested in working on that, I think that would be a net benefit. Good content, interesting to dig into. And if we can get more people involved with Tauri, I'm never going to say no to that. I guess with that being said, that's where we're going to end it today. I got to get rolling to actually meeting right now. So I'll see you next week for TBD. I'm not sure. Well, I'll put something up on the schedule. Everybody's moving the meetings around, so we'll see if we are able to stick in this same time slot. But happy Tuesday. Have a great rest of your week, everybody. Leave some comments, especially if you want to get involved in Tauri. I would love to get more folks involved. Otherwise, I will see you next week. Happy Tuesday. Bye.